They were Hitler's most secret weapons. But history forgot them. Most people know the SS as the elite enforcers of the Third Reich, the soldiers who enforced Hitler's will and spread terror across Europe. But behind the scenes, beyond the headlines and history books, there existed units that operated in complete secrecy. Units that were unrecorded, unrecognized, and almost entirely forgotten. These were men who trained in hidden camps, moved under the cover of darkness, and carried out missions so dangerous and brutal that even many within the Nazi hierarchy barely knew of their existence. They infiltrated enemy lines, sabotaged vital operations, and struck targets that were meant to remain untouched. Their effectiveness was feared, their methods ruthless, and their names erased from official records. Some of these secret SS units were tasked with hunting down resistance fighters, executing high-profile assassinations, or testing experimental weapons in ways that blurred the line between military strategy and pure horror. Others worked as covert intelligence operatives, gathering information that would determine the outcome of entire campaigns. The stories of these soldiers are fragmented. Only scraps of reports, diaries, and eyewitness accounts survived. Yet from these pieces, a terrifying picture emerges. A world where secrecy and brutality combined, where the stakes were life and death, and where the shadowy SS units shaped battles in ways history has almost entirely ignored. Tonight, we will uncover their hidden operations, meet the men who carried out the impossible, and reveal the terrifying missions that history chose to forget. This is the story of the secret SS units you've never heard of. To understand these secret units, we first need to grasp the world of the SS. Most people have heard of the Waffen SS, the Totenkopf Division, or the Einsatzgruppen, units infamous for their role on the front lines and their brutal enforcement of Nazi ideology. Their names are etched in history, their actions documented, their crimes undeniable. But beyond these well-known formations, there existed SS units that operated completely off the books. They were not listed in official records. They did not march in formation or appear in war reports. Their missions were covert, their operations hidden from even the highest-ranking officers. These were soldiers who existed in the shadows, carrying out acts of sabotage, assassination, and terror that history barely remembers. Some were tasked with sabotage, blowing up railways, factories, and communication lines behind enemy lines. Others carried out experiments, not the medical kind that shocked the world, but psychological, tactical, and technological experiments designed to push the limits of warfare. And a few were so secret that their very existence was denied even after the war. Diaries were destroyed, reports erased, and names wiped from memory. The few fragments that survive tell stories of missions so dangerous, so ruthless, that they blur the line between military strategy and pure horror. These units were invisible warriors, ghostly enforcers of an empire that thrived on secrecy and fear. And it is in these shadows that we begin to uncover the truth about the secret SS units you've never heard of. One of the most elusive of these secret SS formations specialized in sabotage and covert operations. While their official designation remains lost to history, records and survivor testimonies hint at a unit trained to strike swiftly, disappear without a trace, and leave chaos in their wake. Their missions were surgical and terrifying. Bridges would collapse overnight, railways would vanish under mysterious explosions, and enemy communication lines would go silent without warning. They operated deep behind Allied lines, often wearing civilian clothes, blending seamlessly with the environment. No one knew who struck until it was too late. Entire supply lines were destroyed, leaving Allied forces stunned and scrambling to regroup. Within this shadowy world, individual stories emerge. One soldier, barely 20, recalled the nights spent crawling through enemy territory, placing explosives with trembling hands, knowing a single mistake could mean death. His diary, found decades later, speaks of the strange pride and fear that haunted every mission. Pride in the precision, fear for the unknown consequences. These men and women were ghosts on the battlefield. Their presence felt only through the destruction they left behind. They were invisible, lethal, and forgotten. The perfect instruments of terror in a war already defined by horror. Maps flicker on screen, showing lines of movement, targets struck in the dead of night. Illustrations depict operatives setting charges, disappearing into shadows, and the violent aftermath of their actions. Each explosion, each sabotage mission, echoes with the silence of those who vanished without leaving a trace. Another secret SS formation delved into the realm of experiments and extreme missions. Unlike the sabotage units, these operatives were tasked with testing new technologies, weapons, and psychological operations, often in ways so dark that official records were destroyed or falsified. Some units experimented with advanced weaponry, from prototype explosives to experimental vehicles designed for stealth and destruction. Others carried out missions that blurred the line between espionage and terror, infiltrating towns to manipulate populations, gather intelligence, or eliminate key figures without leaving any trace. Their work was so classified that even high-ranking officers outside the unit knew very little about their actions. One commander, known only by his code name, led a small team into enemy territory to test a new sabotage device. Letters later found in a hidden archive describe the tension of moving through enemy lines, setting devices under the cover of darkness, and retreating before the first explosions lit the night sky. The success of these missions depended on precision, courage, and an unwavering loyalty to orders. Yet the human cost was immense, often unrecorded. This unit operated in shadows, where every mission carried the weight of secrecy. Entire towns might never know they had been part of a test or an experiment. Every action was calculated, every risk magnified, and every outcome hidden from history. Visuals depict experimental equipment, secret workshops, and dramatic reconstructions of missions. Shadows move along darkened streets. Maps highlight unknown operation zones, and faint echoes of explosions suggest the terrifying effectiveness of these clandestine operations. The audience begins to grasp the scale and secrecy of what was happening behind enemy lines. Operations so hidden that some historians still debate their very existence. Another layer of the SS's secret world focused on assassination and covert intelligence. These units were designed to strike at the heart of the enemy, removing key figures, infiltrating command structures, and sabotaging critical intelligence networks. Their existence was whispered about in high-ranking Nazi circles, but very few outsiders ever knew the full extent of their operations. Operatives were trained in disguise, silent movement, and close-quarters combat. They infiltrated enemy territory posing as civilians, partisans, or even allied soldiers, striking swiftly and disappearing without leaving a trace. Missions ranged from eliminating military leaders to sabotaging critical communications, and sometimes they targeted political figures to destabilize regions under occupation. One young SS operative, barely out of training, was sent on a mission to eliminate a high-ranking officer coordinating Allied supply lines. Surviving letters reveal the tension, the fear, and the meticulous planning required to move unseen through enemy-controlled villages. He described the eerie silence before an operation, the adrenaline as the target was approached, and the haunting knowledge that discovery would mean certain death, not just for him, but for his entire team. These units operated in a world where information was as lethal as any weapon. Their successes often went unrecorded, their failures erased from archives. Maps and files reconstructed decades later hint at their movements, revealing a network of covert operatives who changed the course of local battles without ever appearing in official histories. Visuals show shadowy figures moving through foggy forests, secret documents, and encrypted messages being delivered under the cover of night. The camera lingers on maps marking unknown target zones, emphasizing the precision and secrecy of these missions. The audience begins to understand that some of the war's most impactful operations were carried out by people history almost forgot. A hidden layer of conflict where death, stealth, and intelligence intertwined. Beyond sabotage and assassination, some SS units specialized in psychological warfare and terror. Their mission was not only to kill or destroy, but to instill fear, break morale, and control populations in occupied territories. These were the shadowy enforcers of the Nazi regime, invisible yet omnipresent. They spread propaganda in the most insidious ways. Fake leaflets warning of brutal reprisals, staged executions meant to terrorize entire villages, and the sudden appearance of SS patrols that vanished before anyone could react. Their operations often left communities traumatized, creating chaos and distrust among civilians and resistance groups alike. One account tells of a small unit sent to a border town where partisans had been active. The soldiers moved under the cover of night, using local knowledge and intelligence from collaborators. By dawn, key buildings had been destroyed, symbolic arrests had been made, and a message was left. Fear was now the ruler. Survivors would recount the horror for decades. yet the names of the operatives were never recorded. These missions were not just physical battles. They were psychological campaigns. They sought to manipulate emotions, force compliance, and demonstrate power without engaging in open combat. Historians piecing together after-action reports discovered patterns of terror, sudden raids, untraceable disappearances, and the calculated use of rumor and fear, all pointing to the careful orchestration of these secret SS units. Visuals emphasize the haunting atmosphere: empty streets at dawn, smoke rising from destroyed buildings, shadowy figures disappearing into the fog. Maps highlight occupied regions affected by these operations, while reenactments illustrate the chilling precision with which these units executed their psychological campaigns. The audience begins to realize that the Nazi war machine wasn't only about tanks and guns. It was about control, fear, and domination. And some of the most effective tools were the SS units that history almost forgot. Among the most obscure SS units were those involved in experimental warfare and testing of unconventional tactics. These soldiers operated on the fringes of science and military strategy, often performing missions that blurred the line between genius and madness. Their work ranged from testing new weapons to practicing infiltration techniques that most conventional units could never attempt. One such unit reportedly focused on unconventional armored vehicles, creating prototypes that were faster, lighter, and sometimes more lethal than standard Wehrmacht tanks. While many of these projects never saw the battlefield, the training and tests conducted were harrowing. Soldiers were pushed to their physical and mental limits, facing dangerous machinery, unpredictable explosives, and extreme weather conditions. Accounts from surviving members describe nights spent in freezing forests, assembling and testing experimental weapons, always under the looming threat of reprisal from their own commanders for any failure. Another small contingent specialized in special operations, inserting agents behind enemy lines, sabotaging critical infrastructure, and gathering intelligence in territories where discovery meant certain death. Their operations were precise and calculated, often leaving no trace, and their identities remained a closely guarded secret, even from other SS divisions. One mission that survived in fragmented records tells of a small team sent to neutral territory to disrupt Allied supply lines. Using forged papers, false identities, and concealed explosives, they struck swiftly and vanished before the authorities could respond. Their impact was felt for weeks, yet historians struggle to piece together the full story because the records were intentionally destroyed after the war. Visuals for this segment show schematics of experimental vehicles, blurred archival photos of training exercises, and dramatic reenactments of agents moving stealthily behind enemy lines. Maps illustrate the clandestine paths taken during these operations, while voiceover emphasizes the tension, secrecy, and danger inherent to these units. By exploring these experimental and special warfare units, the audience gains a chilling insight into how far some within the SS were willing to go, not only to serve the Reich, but to push the boundaries of what was humanly possible in the theater of war. Their missions were deadly, their successes hidden, and their existence nearly erased from history. As the war drew to a close, these secret SS units vanished almost without a trace. Unlike the larger, well-documented divisions of the Waffen SS, their missions, personnel, and outcomes were deliberately erased or left unrecorded. Some soldiers simply melted back into civilian life, carrying the burden of what they had seen and done. Others were hunted by the Allies, prosecuted in post-war trials, or disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The legacy of these units is chilling. They exemplify the extremes of secrecy, fanaticism, and brutality that characterize the SS. They operated in shadows, where normal rules did not apply, performing sabotage, experiments, and assassinations in ways that few outside their command could even imagine. Many of their operations changed the course of smaller battles, disrupted supply lines, or inflicted terror on both civilians and enemy soldiers. Yet, because their existence was hidden, history often overlooks the full scope of their impact. Survivors' accounts, fragmented reports, and declassified intelligence provide glimpses into these clandestine operations. These sources reveal not only the tactical ingenuity of the units, but also the moral darkness. Soldiers trained to be both invisible and ruthless, operating without oversight, and often without mercy. The psychological toll on these men was immense, and for many, the horrors they enacted haunted them for the rest of their lives. In the present day, Historians continue to uncover fragments of these forgotten units, piecing together their stories from destroyed documents, eyewitness accounts, and rare photographs. Museums, archives, and research institutions work to shine a light on these hidden chapters, reminding the world that not all warfare was fought on the front lines, and that some of history's most dangerous operatives were deliberately erased from memory. Visuals for this final segment include black and white archival footage, maps showing areas of secret operations, close-ups of declassified documents, and somber reenactments emphasizing the isolation and danger of these units. A haunting, slow musical score underscores the voiceover, leaving the audience with a sense of mystery, dread, and reflection. The story of the secret SS units is a reminder that history often holds layers of truth, some hidden, some horrifying. And that behind every known battle and famous leader, there were shadows operating in silence, shaping the outcomes of war in ways few ever knew.